really wanted to be able to go over the interpretations that exercise that we had done. Many of you had provided just such terrific insights. There was some really good conversation that took place among some of the discussions in the forum. And I wanted to make sure that everybody got a chance to hear what each of you had said. And so I'm going to sort of bring together everything that was posted sort of in a short little presentation here and summarize what took place in the discussion boards. So your interpretations, the first part of that exercise was for you to listen to the song, and then what were your interpretations of it? Some of you said, don't be afraid of who you truly are, no matter what the situation. Inspire her fans to feel brave. Was speaking to those who were bullied. She compares the power of words and the weakness of silence, and potentially about a person in an abusive relationship. Those who feel like they're different or they don't fit in, this would speak to them. And to be unique and not to just give in to society. And then I asked you to take a look at what the Children's Hospital had done with it and compare your interpretation of the song with what the Children's Hospital's interpretation was. And in looking at that, then I said, well, are all interpretations valid? And here's what some of you said. One can interpret the lyrics a whole bunch of ways, based on their fears, what they had trouble speaking about. The song could be played years later, and the interpretations of those people about the song are still valid because what they experience is as true as the original intent. The message that she expressed fits more than one situation. Interpretation is very tricky. One person can be influenced by something and interpret it to mean one thing, while the intention of the author could be from a completely different realm. And Sharon says, I think there are many valid interpretations for this song because it can speak to different people in so many different ways. After all, the word brave has a universal meaning. People identify with words in different ways based on what they've experienced in their own lives. And it all depends on how you can connect to it in your life. The song began to have a life of its own. No matter what one's brave story was, Sarah Bareilles was proud that she was able to help people take that step to face their fears and have courage, which does not make it wrong, it just makes it different. As long as an interpretation is logical and can be supported and related to Bareilles' intended message. Someone can interpret the bravery aspect of a song in a negative light, as in to be brave enough to hurt someone, and I don't believe that the message of the song is suggesting that sort of idea. The boundaries to the song would be to not inflict a violent or unjust act against someone. And there are barriers when deciding what interpretation is congruent with the artist's intention. Not anything can go. One must carefully interpret what the artist's intentions are and stay within that framework. The only boundaries that would exist in the interpretation of a work would be based upon the evidence that exists within the work. If there isn't evidence to support an interpretation, then it isn't really a valid one. So what we had was a divide into two camps, I would say, of the class. Some of you felt that any interpretation was perfectly valid. Others of you did feel that there was some boundaries that you should stay within in terms of your own interpretation. And that depended on the author's intent. And so we come to this question then of just how important is the author's intent. On one side, you can say that the author's intent doesn't matter at all, which we could call that banishing the author altogether. The only meaning, interpretation, is the one that the people who hear it and or read it have of a work. But again, there were others that say that the writers write for the purpose of creating something. They have something that they want to say. And so we sort of owe it to them to at least hear that message, and that our own interpretations and how it resonates with us then is informed by that author's intent. So that brings me now to this last comment that was posted by Patrick. And what he said was, the essential quality to a song which makes it entirely subjective is the fact that it is art first and foremost. Musicians sometimes struggle with the concept that once they release their work, it is no longer theirs to control it. The piece is interpreted and changed and understood in different lights, in different perspectives. Art is subjective, because once something is created, it is created to be viewed or heard, and everyone sees and hears differently. Even if someone had a terrible rationale behind their interpretation, it would still be valid by the virtue that it is art they are pondering. No interpretation of art, no matter how absurd it may seem to us, is invalid. I would also say it is unfair to compare a work of art, like a song, a painting, or a novel even, to a gospel. So Patrick's put a lot of points in here that I think I would like to look at. One is that he talks about art being completely subjective, and there I would have to say in some cases that is true, in other cases it is not. There are artists, such as Ernest Hemingway, for example, who wrote and did not write with a specific intention in mind. He was sort of part of a creative process. And so for him, whatever it was that the reader got out of his work, that was the interpretation. But others do write with a particular intent in mind. They had something that they wanted to express. How often have we written something, be it an email or a card or a letter, or even have spoken something, and the person that we address it to takes it the quote-unquote wrong way, and wait, that's not what I meant. So there are those artists who certainly struggle with that it is not what they meant. You could Google songs that don't mean what you think, and you'd get a bunch of them that come up. One of them I think that's particularly notable is one that was by the Beastie Boys. It was called "You Have to Fight for Your Right to Party." Well, the song was intended to be sort of a spoof and to poke fun at all of the party songs that were popular back in the 80s. And the song ended up becoming a popular party song. The artists were just so upset by this that they just don't perform, or rarely will perform the song anymore, because it was not taken in the intent that they intended it to be. So on the one hand, I would have to say that if the author does have an intent, that we probably should at least be aware of it. I think we owe it to them to know what it was that they were trying to say. And I think in that context then, even in art, it frames, I think that was one of you said, helps to frame our interpretations and how we look at a piece. What we've touched on here is something of a philosophical debate in literary theory, and I would bring up the work of E.D. Hirsch, who wrote in the late 1960s, and what he stated, what the bottom line of his theory was that a text can only communicate meaning through its words, and words depend on intention for this meaning. So to banish the author camp, if it's only what it means to its readers, then there's no meaning in particular. Now, in the case of our Gospels, we know that our artists, and the evangelists were artists. There are different forms that they use within their Gospels, and the way that they took the material that was available to them and shaped it is, I think, artistic. But they did write with a specific intent. They did have something that they intended to say. Can we dismiss what they wrote or why they wrote what they were writing? I would say no. And to Patrick's point, the way that you would interpret different forms, say in a song, we might have a little bit more leeway, and author intent might not play as important a role, but in a gospel it does. And here I will quote from Dei Verbum, and it states, "However, since God speaks in sacred scripture through men in human fashion, the interpreter of sacred scripture, in order to see clearly what God wanted to communicate to us, should carefully investigate what meaning the sacred writers really intended and what God wanted to manifest by means of their words. To search out the intention of the sacred writers, attention should be given, among other things, to literary forms, for truth is set forth and expressed differently in texts which are variously historical, prophetic, poetic, or of other forms of discourse. The interpreter must investigate what meaning the sacred writer intended to express and actually expressed in particular circumstances by using contemporary literary forms in accordance with the situation of his own time and culture. For the correct understanding of what the sacred author wanted to assert, due attention must be paid to the customary and characteristic styles of feeling, speaking, and narrating which prevailed at the time of the sacred writer, and to the patterns men normally employed at that period in their everyday dealings with one another." So again, really great job on this assignment, and I think, I hope that this helps sort of bring us full circle to the importance of knowing the author's intent when we are studying the Synoptic Gospels this semester.